well, Anneloes. So not only the people in
Nice.
class, but whoever else in the world would like to listen to you. So I was just saying that Dr. Anneloes Smitsman is an evolutionary scientist, system scientist, I should say, and that's an important dimension for us because we do take a systems perspective in our work here. But I should also say that she is founder and CEO of Earthwise. And we connected way back when we were talking about seeds and the seeds constitution and all of that. So the way Anneloes and I connected was when we were talking about new paradigm politics. So that this work is not only abstract, it is translated into politics and policy, which is exactly what we try to do here. So to make the, one can go on because she has a rather lengthy resume, but let me just say that she is both brilliant and wonderful, and those two things don't always go together. Thank you so much, Anneloes, for making the time. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you and to support this dialogue further, because I really appreciate how you have all been in this long dialogue already. Now, for the timing, I understand that we have about an hour to go through the slides, isn't it? And half an hour for conversation. I will try to make it shorter, the slides, so we have more time for conversation. How many students are with you so that I know
we normally have, how many do we have right now? 4, 5. The class total strength is 8, so 2 or 3 might come. But you have 5 right now.
Okay, great. So for those of you who are listening here in the class, I really love great questions. So great questions meaning, you know, to take it further, go deeper. So I'd really, as you're listening, start to also see what resonates for you. What are the key concepts that you like to explore further, so that we get this kind of active listening. And I think that as this is also live streamed on YouTube, I don't know if your IT person has a way of catching comments also on YouTube, so that perhaps we can bring in those viewers as well to join in the conversation. And oh, if the host can enable screen sharing, that would be great. Then I can share some slides.
Yeah, I think that's the host.
IT, can we give the sharing privileges? Can I give the sharing privileges?
You probably have them.
Usually it's just the Zoom admin.
Yeah, so yes, I
or
do
you
have.
need to make me co-host. That's another way to do it.
Yes, yes, of course.
Don't want to rename.
IT, are you able to, are you here?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give ये Anneloes Smitsman को जो दिख रही है उनको please sharing rights दे दीजिए.
Great. We're going to take a deep dive into living systems. Now that should work. Excellent. Okay. So can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. So I'm just going to make it bigger. Okay, good. You can hear me well? Yeah, excellent. Great, so we're going to take a deep dive, really how we translate the wisdom and cosmology of living systems into new paradigm politics. And we use the Earthwise Constitution for planetary civilization as a case study. So since the context that you've been gathering, it has been already about applied spirituality and exploring the deeper sense of unity, both in the mystical experiences, but also applied, you may find that by exploring, what is that cosmology and the evolutionary principles of living systems, that it gives yet another kind of framework, but also perspective for what's been felt by people all over the world as a deep sense of unity with life, how to tap into that wisdom of nature, which is vital right now, because if we don't do that, then we will continue to create systems and worlds that by design not only collapse, but create collapse. We're living in a unified universe. And perhaps one of the biggest testimonies of the deeper interdependence of life is the fact that there is consequence to action. But we're learning this as a species in a rather negative way. So I want to explore here with you, what are the foundations really for co-creating thrivable worlds and futures, applying the cosmology, evolutionary principles and capacities of our universe, of life itself that has evolved and grown over billions of years of a collaborative learning process that we form part of. But we do need to actively apply that in order to really work with this. So let's just set the bigger context. I think that many of you here are well aware of the sustainability crisis and the tipping point times in which we are now. But let's just take a bit of a deep dive into what is this call for new paradigm politics and governance really all about. So first of all, planet Earth herself is radically shifting. All of us have ways of being impacted by the climate change crisis, the biodiversity crisis, increasing socio-economic tensions, political divisions. And so from all of us who are even living on different parts of the world, there's ways in which we are experiencing these impacts and the difficult times that go with that. So this is not the like to presence that are catalytic tipping points that are starting to converge. Some call this the meta crisis that we're in. So this is not just a climate tipping point. This is when the climate, biodiversity, economic, social, political, etc., when there are various natures of tipping points that are starting to converge and impact each other, creating catalytic changes in ways that we don't really yet know what the consequences of that will be. But it's important that we get ready, that we prepare, that we have the courage also to face what's going on, but then utilize that really to bring forth a greater human learning. And from that, do deep learning to understand the causes for all of this and how we can start to create systems that are thrivable by design. So the old paradigm of institutionalized duality, designed for separation, growth without boundaries, and freedom without responsibility will not secure our future. So you maybe want to kind of ponder on those words, because I think that really sums up the core problems with the systems today and why they are unsustainable by design, because they're designed for separation, they have growth without boundaries, freedom without responsibility. Yeah, so just really take that in for a moment. Now, you would hope that policy design does something about this and takes an active role in helping to transform the very systems and models that are unsustainable by design. However, research all over the world is showing it's not. In fact, it's lagging behind vastly, and many policy designers and policy implementers are also not trained in having a systemic understanding of the sustainability crisis that we are in, and therefore the systemic solutions that are required for addressing that. On top of that, systemic and courageous leadership and bold investments are also lacking and really are required to shift these trajectories from collapse to regeneration and thriving. And I'm saying leadership here, I don't mean just our political leaders or elected leaders, but I'm talking about all of us here as leaders as well. We all have leadership potential and leadership capacities. Each of us in our own lives and ways can take the lead for the changes that are necessary. So a new paradigm in politics and governance is a planetary imperative, because unless we also mature as a species, meaning we're learning from the damage that we're causing, we're learning from the feedback that we are creating, we are learning to collaborate in ways we never have, and then learn how to become net positive to nature, which means that we are giving back and generating more than that we are taking. Unless we do that, then the human experiment of nature may soon end. So to address that, and it's from Earthwise Center, one of our most ambitious initiatives for addressing the root causes of the sustainability crisis, we've created an Earthwise Constitution for a planetary civilization. So why planetary civilization? Because we've never actually had a planetary civilization. We've had civilizations of all kinds of different cultures and religions. But right now, if you're looking what's really asked from humanity is that we are coming together, that we are understanding who we are at a species level, but that at the species level, we're also understanding how we form part of a larger civilization of the Earth herself, with an incredible biodiversity. So it's about humanity joining the planetary civilization and being in right relationship with that civilization, and how to really human with maturity, with wisdom, in the kind of values that, from what I understand in the course, you've already been exploring through applied spirituality. So the Earthwise Constitution, it's an open source. It serves as a compass, also a new kind of social contract. It's free to use. You can customize it. And this is what's unique about it. So it's not a constitution where the only option is you have to sign it. No, this one actually, it serves to inspire, to expand your thinking and understanding about living systems, and become aware of the constitutions of living systems, the constitution of the universe. And when I use the word constitution in this context, what I mean with that is the deeper architecture, the deeper informational coding, the evolutionary potentials of life itself, and how that becomes nested and enabled through living systems. So as you go through this constitution, if you want to use it to create your own constitution, for example, for your movements, or even as a personal pledge for your life, or for your own organization, you can do that, as long as you just give the proper acknowledgement. But then you can do that, and you can change it to your wording. We're even working on a children's version. And we have been working with this constitution with a growing partnership alliance, where over 43 organizations around the world have already joined and pledged to really work together through a common vision and shared agreements for this transition to a planetary civilization. It also includes 13 living systems protocols, and I'll touch base on that a little bit further in this presentation. We released it last year. People are spontaneously and voluntarily already translating it, which is beautiful, and I think that speaks to the spirit of this document. So it is already available in English and Spanish, but also very soon in French. It's being translated in Japanese, German, and Dutch, and perhaps in your country as well. If anyone wants to translate it, just get in touch with me, because we just want this to spread far and wide, to really inspire, who we can become as the people for this time. It's based on a compass. It's a compass for thrivability. It's also a cosmological compass, a cosmic compass. Now, sometimes when people hear the word cosmic or cosmos, they don't realize what actually that word means, and they attribute it as something that is rather ethereal. However, cosmos just means in Greek ordered wholeness. So when we're talking about cosmic or the cosmos, what we're talking about is the deeper informational architecture of wholeness, of life, the universe, and even consciousness itself. So you see in this compass lots of little dots. There's a sacred geometry design all behind that. And these little dots, every dot in this compass is an article in the Constitution. And it's also a little dot that you can use to meditate upon, to explore, to sense into What does that mean to be walking from that core code of unity, which is the little black dot in the center? And then from that code of unity that's cosmologically given, how to bring that out into the world, how you yourself are that beautiful little dot of unity and wholeness. And so how do you bring into expression and into actualization the potentials of consciousness and of life that you are entrusted with for this time? And this constitution starts with our promise rather than a declaration. And this is our promise that we as future ancestors of a planetary civilization commit to co-creating thrivable worlds and futures with the wisdom of living systems in partnership with life and our Earth. So I love to, even for myself, just remind myself of that promise. So you can even work with this promise. If you want to draw it on a paper, stick it on your fridge. It's the first thing you may see in the morning. And live into that, reaffirm that, make that commitment. What does it mean for you to be a future ancestor of this emerging planetary civilization? It's a new kind of civilization that is growing out of the maturation and the evolution of human consciousness. It's an emerging civilization that is growing out of everything that we're learning, and it's growing out of a growing group of people and organizations who are standing for life, who are standing for the well-being of future generations, who are standing for and with and in solidarity with the Earth. So really explore what that means, what your promise is for this time and for the changes that we are in. I won't be going through all the details of the vision, but it's a beautiful vision to just meditate again upon, reflect upon, read it out loud or share it with some friends. But the essence of this Article 1, our vision, is the vision of how we have become this planetary civilization as thriving communities of life, as wise and joyful and loving partners of our Earth. So everything that we have been working with from this Earthwise Constitution is based on that vision. So if we take that journey into that potential, into that greater possibility, making the commitment for that, and start to live into that, then the questions from that future vision is, what did we do? What did we learn? What did we change? What did we let go of? How did we make this possible? So it's an active vision. And Article 2 then brings us to our purpose, and that is to steward and actualize the possibilities for thrivable worlds and futures by co-creating the capacities, the systems, the governance, tools, and pathways for a planetary civilization. So this is what we're confirming, that really what our deeper purpose is from a species level as humanity, that we can then individualize, or you can adjust it for your organization. Or even for your movement, but starting from this larger commitment of the larger purpose that we are called to serve for this time. And I would like to guide you into a bit of more of an exploration then of the cosmology and the evolutionary principles of living systems, because the entire constitution is based on translating that wisdom and these capacities of living systems now also to new paradigm governance, education, new paradigm politics, even economics, new paradigm social systems. So to begin with, what I love about living systems, so to me, in fact, the exploration of living systems is very spiritual in nature, because the deeper you go into that, the more amazing it is to see how deeply unified life is and what life makes possible, and the miracle of life, the wonder of life. So living systems network, embody, and actualize the quantum potentials of the universe through evolutionary capacities that make life possible as well as thrivable. Now, the latest research coming out of quantum physics actually confirms that the true nature of reality is non-local and not local, as was assumed by more of the old paradigm Newtonian sciences. So if we realize that the nature of reality is non-local, so it's really quantum, yeah, it's cosmological, then it makes sense that we start to learn from systems in nature, in life, that know how to work with that. And there's a whole discussion right now on lots of new technologies and AI and the dangers around it as well, and quantum computers. But before we jump into all of that, you know, the best quantum computer there is actually a living system, a complex living system. So let's go back to the foundations. How does life do that? How do living systems utilize these quantum potentials of the universe? And in the quantum potentials of the universe is also the potential for the imaginal, is the potential for transformation, is the potential for rebirth, is the potential to jump to higher orders of complexity, and the potential for evolutionary coherence. So there is amazing potential in the quantum potential of the universe. And it's precisely those potentials that have not been embedded within the mainstream governance and political and economic and social systems of our world, and which are thus also not thrivable by design. So this is just a quick summary about thinking about the capacities of living systems, the autopoietic capacities of living systems, which you can really summarize as self-regulation, the capacity of adaptation, and self-creation. And I use that as a litmus test whenever I need to evaluate whether a system has a thrivable potential or capacity by design, yes or no, whether it's a business model, a governance model, or social system. It can even be a relationship. I test it along those three values. So to give a quick example, what happens if you can't self-regulate? For example, if you are in an addiction, if your autonomy is harmed, you're not able to self-regulate. If you can't self-regulate, you can't balance. Your body, if your body can't self-regulate temperature, you'll be running a fever, or you'll be so cold that you can't maintain your body heat. So these capacities of self-regulation, the capacity also of adaptation, and this self-creation, out of which comes also the self-renewal, that's given in living systems. That is innate. And this is what it enables. It enables autonomy. And autonomy is the foundation for individuated existence and self-aware consciousness. It enables also now through this autonomy, and you'll see as we go deeper, each layer builds on the next, because it forms a whole system that enables learning by being able to explore affordances and potentials and responding to feedback that is generated through activity and interaction. Really essential for young children to learn. They need to be able to explore those potentials within themselves and their environment that gives them the feedback then through which they then adjust their stances and as well as their goals. And that enables, and that's the kind of learning that can then lead to development if learning gets internalized and integrated through new stances, new capacities, and structures of increasing complexity. So here there's a difference between learning and development in the sense that development is integral and then there's a structural shift. For example, if somebody is simply learning to repeat certain words on a page for an exam and only replicated what the examiner wants, there is no developmental process. For learning to become developmental, then we need to see also a structural shift in the way that's internalized, leading to new behavior, new perspectives, new understanding. And living systems have those innate capacities to be able to do that. This again, as a test as well, you can then see how a lot of our economic and political systems, although we're speaking about economic development, they are in fact not developmental because they are not even enabling this kind of internalization and integration and this structural shift to higher orders of complexity. Through autonomy, learning, development, then that becomes the foundation for enabling evolution. And this is when we are now more at the meta level, where we're creating new networks and possibilities that actualize our evolutionary potentials in a future supportive and life-enhancing direction. And all of that together are really the foundations then for thrivability. So here you see that thrivability emerges out of that process by enabling then these capacities for renewal, regeneration, and transformation through a developmental and evolutionary process. So we are part of the universe, and so this to me is really, in a nutshell, the collective intelligence of the universe. Really amazing. And therefore also the planetary collective intelligence of our Earth. But you can see then how much we've grown away from that in the design and the development of our human systems and models and growth systems. So I want to touch on that briefly before we go back to the Constitution, that what is then the problem with mechanistic systems? And when I'm talking about mechanistic here, that really means these machine-like systems that coming from that old paradigm, Newtonian way of thinking, as if the universe was consisting of separate parts and particles held together by immutable laws. As we know now, that is not the universe that we live in. We live in a universe of deep unity and wholeness. So these mechanistic systems, they were created really for the industrial age to rapidly grow the economic systems, they were also created as systems for domination, for exploitation. They were not designed to be coherent with life. And because they're not designed to cohere with the evolutionary dynamics of life, these systems, they create very specific systemic thrivability barriers. And those barriers are often not diagnosed properly also in assessments of sustainable development goals, policy making for sustainability and implementation. And yet they're really important to be aware of those barriers. And these barriers are not boundary conditions. Barriers meaning they are harming the boundary conditions of living systems. They are harming the boundary conditions of our carrying capacities, both of planetary as well as social carrying capacities. So we need to be aware of these barriers, because if we're not spotting that, diagnosing and addressing it, it starts to get a life of its own, and it actually undermines the very collaboration and resource distribution and new design that is necessary to solve all of these problems that we are now faced with. So here just a quick summary of how they are acting as barriers by imposing goals and dualistic drivers that polarize and divide the diversity of a living system and harm its evolutionary coherence. If we apply that now, for example, to political systems and governance systems, you can see immediately that around the world, democracy, the model of democracy is often still a very narrow majority, if at all. And in the worst case scenario, it is a bipolar system that does tremendous harm to the diversity of a country and its people. Also, mechanistic systems, they cross and undermine essential systemic boundaries, and that harms, therefore, the thrivability, the regeneration, and resilience of living systems. And why? Because mechanistic systems, they don't listen to the feedback of living systems, and that is by design. They don't internalize the feedback of living systems, so they're not learning also from the negative impacts that we cause to living systems. Mechanistic economic growth doesn't have any breaks. So to think that the classical economy is going to solve the problems is, to my view as a system scientist, a huge illusion. Because a system that doesn't have a break, it doesn't have a stop mechanism to stop or slow down harm, you can't let such a system just run wild and think it's going to self-organize for thrivability. So the feedback loops of the systemic boundaries are not internalized in mainstream economic systems. And in mechanistic governance models and political systems, because they are dualistic by design, win-lose competition, winner or even winner takes it all, it doesn't attract collaboration for planetary security and having the long view of future well-being. And so how we are addressing all of this in the Earthwise Constitution in Article 3 is we're summarizing that cosmology and evolutionary capacities of living systems through 3 principles. I won't be reading them all out here. You'll have time to go through that on your own. But just to acknowledge that we're starting really in that first principle to acknowledge how the universe exists and evolves as a single unified entity, an undividable wholeness. And that coming out of that principle, we're looking then, and that's that little dot is represented in the compass, that little black dot. And then from there, we're looking at the process of change as a spiraling process. And that has an evolutionary direction of increasing complexity over time, but through deepening evolutionary coherence. And that's what's really represented by that beautiful little spiral. And in the third principle, you'll see that there is now a boundary, there's another circle around that spiral, and that's so that living systems also can balance and create conditions for autonomy and individuated self-awareness. So through that principle, we acknowledge how does the universe then actualize its cosmological potentials by creating these systemic conditions for deepening self-aware consciousness and the capacities for exploring and actualizing our potential. As this lectures in the context also of applied spirituality, it might be nice to explore in the follow-up here, how these three principles, how you can find them back through many of the wisdom traditions and spiritual traditions of humanity over time. Yeah, because you may find that that actually gives you a cosmological framework for seeing these beautiful spiritual values and how they meet up and where it's coming from. In the Constitution, as our operating system, we're using archetypal system. And what we're mimicking here is the archetypal pattern of how to actualize something from a future potential to a fully actualized state, mimicking the metamorphic transformation process of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And that is what you're seeing in these 5 circles that are represented here. Each of them represents a particular archetype that gives us capacities, patterns, and perspectives as well. And they're operationalized both within the Constitution, but also within the governance systems that we are building from these constitutions. And we'll explore that a little bit later. So to just go through it briefly for the sake of time, the first archetype, we're named it the wholeness coder. And there's a lot more text in the Constitution itself around that, but I'd invite you to start exploring these archetypal potentials within yourself. How would you act and respond if you are a catalyst for systems change, for example, as a wholeness coder? What would you notice about design of systems or new laws or new basic principles? So the wholeness coder activates the future potentials of our evolutionary next step, really coming from that as an architect, a designer, a coder. And as we're working with that code of wholeness in design, that opens up possibilities for new possibilities. And that's where the next archetype comes in. And we've named that the future creative, because when you're stepping into your future creative capacities, you start to now actively explore the possibilities of the very codes of wholeness that you were exploring one step earlier. And by so doing, creating new openings and pathways for our evolutionary next steps. And as we create and open these possibility spaces for our life, that sets in motion a deeper evolutionary learning process. So when we're stepping into our evolutionary catalyst capacities, we become aware through that evolutionary learning process, what needs to die with dignity? What do we need to let go of, perhaps even dissolve? This is when we go into the cocoon, and now the caterpillar consciousness and the caterpillar capacities and caterpillar structures, even its sensory organs, they start to decompose. And at the same time, there's a deeper activation of the imaginal cells that are becoming the imaginal organs of the butterfly, so that this new emerging butterfly consciousness also has the new sensory organs and hands and feet, or in this case wings, to be able to act in the world. So the evolutionary catalyst is a really important stage in systemic transformation. And what we're seeing right now in the world, both economically and politically, that this is exactly what is not happening. We are not allowing death by design, and we're not internalizing what needs to die, what we need to stop, and how we can do this, as I said earlier, with dignity and with respect. And then the fourth step coming out of that process of systemic transformation is the emergence out of the cocoon. This is the pattern weaver. And as a pattern weaver, you'll start to create the conditions for emergence and embodiment of the new consciousness. And you're weaving these new communities, collaborations, and systems with a very specific pattern. And that is the pattern of life, a pattern of thriveability, which is a pattern that connects. Whereas the old paradigm mechanistic pattern is a pattern that disconnects. It's a pattern that breaks down. So by developing your pattern weaver capacities, it also is up-leveling your collaborative capacities, your networking capacities, and your evolutionary building capacities. And then this final stage of actualization is when we become the story and we start to be able to really communicate from this actualizing future human potential as new paradigm storytellers, and also to really inspire that deeper shift. But by your very presence, you also start to fertilize and cohere our world with these new paradigm narratives. And by you yourself embodying these beautiful new patterns for thrivable worlds and futures. We have outlined 8 values, founding values for us in the Constitution. But again, as this is an evolutionary blueprint and framework that you can work with and adjust, this is really meant to inspire you to think about what are your values? What are really core values for you, both for your inner development as well as your outer development. So for us, that is originality and inspiration, courage, trust, love, commitment, creativity, and wisdom. And this is then the framework of the 13 living systems protocols that you can use for yourself as well to really assess, am I on a direction of thrivability and regeneration, or am I in a direction of breakdown, collapse, and not in alignment with life? So as a first step, acting from unitive consciousness, and then creating from wholeness, honoring systemic boundaries and cycles as we explored earlier. That's really important when we're working with living systems. Growing our freedoms as an evolutionary process, and that really shifts how we think about freedom. And freedom is not just a human right, but freedom means that we need to be able to act on that. There needs to be also a systemic and an environmental context that enables that. So we're growing, living systems grow those freedoms as evolutionary processes. Evolving through conscious choice and empowered participation, acting futures as evolutionary attractives. Yeah. So this is another way of thinking about time, rather than thinking of future only, we're going towards collapse and the future is not going to be good. And but no, what if future really is this directionality of life towards evolution, towards a greater actualization of consciousness as fundamental? How could future then really activate as an evolutionary attractor to attract us forward into the maturation of our species? And the 7th one here is then developing our capacities for regeneration and thrivability, rather than what's happening right now. Often people are at schools and university told to develop their capacities for competition, or domination. So this is a different focus. Collaborate for the maturation of our species, number 8, and not just to try to solve the sustainability crisis. Address the systemic thrivability barriers of those mechanistic systems that we saw earlier. Contribute as a future ancestor. Invest in the fertility and abundance of life, number 11. Communicate for thrivability. Don't just communicate for popularity, for influence. No, really communicate for thrivability with that pattern that connects. Become Earthwise, wise like our planet. So these are the 13 protocols, and I've highlighted a couple of them that I want to explore with you further. And the first one is the importance of honoring systemic boundaries and cycles. That's the understanding that living systems grow and mature through circulatory flows, metabolic processes, life cycles, and systemic boundaries. And so you can affirm it for yourself. Be as nature. Become regenerative and thrivable by design. And that means listening. Living systems also are systems of consciousness. They communicate. The whole universe is an incredible system of communication. Communication in both visible and invisible ways. So listen, relate with living systems. Listen to the feedback. Listen to the feedback of the trees. Listen to the feedback of the oceans, the whales. What are the birds telling us? What are the bees telling us? Listen to the feedback of planetary boundaries, sustainability thresholds, ecological ceilings, and social foundations. And when you get a sense of this feedback, both in a way that you can perhaps measure scientifically, but also intuitively, and also in your deeper spiritual sense of life, then help to make it visible, help to make it meaningful, help to make it relatable for both decision-making as well as storytelling, so it can really inspire us to partner life in this deeper transformation. So 6.4, the fourth protocol of the living system protocols, grow our freedoms as an evolutionary process, as I mentioned earlier. Living systems are creative and they grow their freedoms ecosystemically by learning how to balance, regulate, attune, and adapt activities, resources, and processes as a whole. So here you see again how these capacities of living systems that we touched on earlier, self-regulation, adaptation, self-creation, they come back here and they are essential for creating conditions for freedom and autonomy. And as you are working also in the deeper mystical cores or the experience of this deeper spirituality of life, so here dissolving the illusion of separation in the pursuit of freedom, cultivate freedom from wholeness and unity with life, and how this localizes in our autonomy. This shift by dissolving the illusion of separation in the pursuit of freedom, what that shift is really about is that we're not seeking freedom from. If we are seeking freedom from, often there is a deeper, more subtle rejection. And what we reject as a way of coming back. And so we are dissolving that illusion of separation and standing, we're all together in this and we need each other. And then it also activates and brings forth a greater love and compassion and care. Evolve through conscious choice and empowered participation. Apply this in your life. Start to really explore, am I making a conscious and informed choice? Insist on empowered participation and don't let other people make the choice for you. Get part of that process. But this as well shows you kind of a criteria of exactly what doesn't work in the old paradigm, political and economic systems, because it doesn't enable conscious choice, neither empowered participation. So life creates conditions for empowered participation in the co-evolution of our worlds and futures. The 10th protocol, contribute as a future ancestor. Yeah, so act as one. Not just think about this intellectually, but really act as a future ancestor of the worlds and futures we seek to co-create an experience based on that deep partnership. How can you support the well-being of both current and unborn future generations? And becoming Earthwise, as I mentioned earlier. And it starts by acknowledging how we're all born with the potential to grow and to evolve. And that we all have the potential for becoming wise like our planet. We too are nature. Now, through this one, I'm going to go fast because I want to show you some applications. But these are Article 7 are our 16 commitments that we're making for being able to really actualize on this vision and possibility. And we carry those commitments also as pledges, and we are currently working on gamifying those pledges. They're fun, they are short. For those of you who are parents, I love going through that even with my children. And I'll go through them just at a very quick high-level overview. So the first 4, the sets of 4 times 4. For the first set of 4 is all about answering the call of our future human potential of the emerging new era. And you will get those slides. So we'll make sure that that is under the YouTube link, as well as that you're getting this in the email follow-up. The next set of 4 are about stewarding for thrivability and how we apply this constitution also as our compass, how we architect with the wisdom of living systems. And then it's all about upgrading how we play the game of life, how we partner the earth, and how we stop the games and the gains of domination, separation, and division, how we act as allies of life with the necessary changes and transformations, and how we become the new world. And this is it's a simple one, but it goes deep, and you can really check yourself, even on a daily basis, the commitment to opt out of systems, practices, and cultures that cause harm and division, and just opt out of that. Make the commitment to opt out of that and opt into systems and ways that heal and regenerate our worlds and planet. Purposefully create thrivable communities and generative ecosystems, become the worlds and futures we wish to live in and experience. So these are all the organizations that have already committed to work together on the basis of the Constitution, and there are many more that are joining from around the world. And we've been, for the last year, also working, how do we now apply this in the design of new governance systems and new economic systems? And we started to create an Earthwise Futures DAO. So DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization using blockchain technology with its own native token. You heard earlier about seeds as the forerunner of that. And we are working together with our partner HIFA, using the HIFA tools for creating this new DAO system. But this one has a very specific purpose, and that is to serve as a prototype for this planetary governance, really based on this constitution, also with these new governance tools and technologies. We're in the early phases of development, and we are now in the process also of incorporation and actually working with the authorities in Mauritius and with legal services to even evolve the policies around that, so that it can become possible for DAOs and this type of DAO to also have a recognized, legally recognized organizational form, and where even the tokens can be regulated in a supportive way, not regulated to constrain, but regulated to also protect, and how it can offer also limited liability. So that's an application also of how we're working at the same time in real life situations to incorporate this, and working with authorities, working with lawyers to really see how can we enable this, and how can that in itself catalyze also this new way of thinking about governance. We're using therefore transparent and democratic tools for groups to organize and govern and coordinate in a decentralized and self-organizing manner. So many DAOs, they emphasize really that decentralized aspect, decentralizing, what they say, governance and democratizing ownership. These are kind of the buzzwords, decentralizing governance, democratizing ownership. However, the weakness of many DAOs is that they don't always have a good governance system, and to self-organize with people who are not very aware and haven't made that common commitment that we've just been going through with the Constitution, can also actually lead to a lot of diversity that's not coherent, and often those experiments, they tend to fracture out. So here we have been working with our partners and in creating specific DAO governance that helps to catalyze also new paradigm governance for planetary stewardship. And that's why the Constitution is serving an essential role. The contributions in the DAO are accounted for in the tokens, and they are rewarded through transparent blockchain treasuries. And that comes with a DAO utility and voice tokens. So I won't go in all of those details, other than to let you know that this is a really exciting case study where we're working together, applying these deeper spiritual and cosmological principles of consciousness, of life, of the universe, with the latest research coming out of quantum physics, with the latest research out of complexity sciences and new economics, driving that new paradigm in governance, working with new business models and entrepreneurial models, and then seeing how we can use this to really catalyze this partnership and also projects and collaboration for the tipping point solutions that are necessary right now. So this is for later when you go through the slides, for those of you who really want to learn more deeply what a DAO is. Very quickly here, because it is programmable, we can therefore also program that nature has rights in our DAO. And this also is a high-level summary of what this DAO system is doing and how this DAO system as a prototype can be used then to create many, many more and new DAOs, which forms part of an ecosystem of DAOs. We're even exploring a very specific AI integration with our partner CrowdSmart for helping to become aware of our collective blind spots, for being able to pattern and integrate the feedback from everyone who's participating in the decision-making and proposing new ideas. The DAO system also enables a new funding model and an ecosystemic funding distribution where all of the DAO token holders, so all of the members of the DAO community have an input in that. It can scale rapidly and it's grounded in real life projects. This is a look inside the DAO, and we'll be adding many more members to this soon, and we'll start operationalizing that over the coming months. And this is a high-level overview of how, when you start with one DAO and you create from that DNA of that DAO and the coding, new unique DAOs that you contextualize for their specific purposes, but forming part of the same blockchain technology, making it possible for those DAOs to use the same user interfaces, to exchange tokens, to communicate with each other. So then you can get that DAO to DAO connections, and you can scale it rapidly for civilizational transformation. And this is an overview of the utilities and the features of the DAO with the specific tools that we are incorporating. This is based on HIFA. These are the tools for collective decision-making, for payroll, compensation, multi-signatory, treasury management, badges. The archetype roles that we saw earlier, they are also incorporated in the roles that people apply for in the DAO to participate in the projects. These are some of the features of CrowdSmart AI integration. And I won't go into the details here because we are getting to the end of time. And with our partner Social Systems Lab, we are also creating new technologies for making it easier to collaborate, to find each other on a map from all over the world, even having an altruistic wallet included, so how we can quickly support each other with funding for projects that need that support on the ground, a visual representation of connections and relationships, and much more. So to complete this, what is the deeper call here? So a new paradigm in politics and governance, in my experience and all the people and partners that we're working with, it is emerging. It's not an easy process, but it is emerging. And it's emerging as a decentralized and planetary response for transforming our democracies, our governance systems, and our economies. It's empowering people to steward the well-being and planetary security of our world and futures through collaborative incentives, participatory decision-making, joint ownership of assets. So that's a very different economic model. As we can see in the DAO, decentralized coordination of resources. And there's a lot of buzzwords here, so I know that would need some unpacking. Distributive value flows, what we mean with that is that it's not that the value is hoarded and taken by a small group of beneficiary owners, but that the value goes back where it was created from, and inclusive opportunities. However, in my view, the ultimate vision for a new paradigm in politics and governance is not about the next political system or electing better political leaders who are having this understanding of the planetary urgency, I mean, really the deeper ultimate vision is about the maturation of our species. And in that maturation process, how we learn to partner our Earth in the evolutionary process of life itself, because we are that process to co-create these thrivable worlds and futures for generations to come. And with that, I'd like to open for conversations.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Anneloes. So let's see. We open up for discussion. What happens? This group is not normally very questioning and commenting group, but let's see.
And you may need to come a bit closer because it's difficult to hear you when you're all so far away from the computer.
Yeah. All right. So we can't get a position. Someone who wants to start with a comment or a question? Okay, let me start down while they think.
Yes, I can't hear the question, so you'll need to, if you can, please speak that into the computer.
All right. See now, are you hearing now? You're not hearing.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, but I cannot hear the people at the back.
Oh yeah, well they're not speaking yet. When we get them to speak, I'll ask them to come up here. If they will speak, we'll see.
Don't be shy.
Right. So Anneloes, the first many things catch my attention, and you mentioned that you will share the slides, right?
Yes, that's it. Yeah, I made them public. I can put them
That would
already.
be good. That would be great. So the first one maybe is the dual nature of institutions.
Yes.
That our institutions have been designed with dualism, based on dualism. Yeah. And we, as you know, I mentioned, we have been talking here in this class about non-dual. This Advaita Vedanta is about a non-dual world. You know, ultimately, the understanding and teaching of Advaita Vedanta is that the world is based on oneness and unity, and that we share a single consciousness.
Yes.
But our policies are dualistic, our institutions are dualistic, and that's the bridge, no, that we need to begin to cross. So I guess the Earthwise Constitution is your recommendation to cross that bridge, is it?
That's it, exactly. Because we're starting, that's why in the center of the compass in the Constitution is that code of unity. So that's understanding that, yeah, we all are sharing that same consciousness. We are that same consciousness. And to see what the wholeness behind the perception or illusion of duality, and also the play then from unity in and as diversity, because there's been this polarity effect between, on the one hand, these very dualized systems and institutional systems that are dualized by design, and then we also have had these experiments where unity became uniformity, and both uniformity as well as dualized systems are systems of domination and oppression, that they create separation and they create pain.
Indeed. So the next point was I like how you compare the mechanistic view of the world. You know, we talk a lot about the reductionist Newtonian world paradigm and the living system worldview, or the evolutionary systems worldview. And we discussed that, and we talked quite a bit, you know, using complex adaptive systems thinking. But everybody sees a world of public policy which is so anchored in neoclassical economics and reductionist thinking and we seem to lose hope that, you know, in Earth Constitution, you know, might start, but will only gather steam in a long time to come at the planetary. And so people feel sort of anxious, worried that we might not make it on time. You know, climate change is running away with us while we don't seem to be waking up. Any thoughts on that? How do we accelerate that change?
Yes. Well, first of all, to accelerate means that at this stage, what I see is in the new emerging systems, they need to link up and they need to collaborate. And a big problem within, especially in the non-profit organizations and domains who are trying hard to make a difference and keep that hope alive, there's actually a lot of competition because of scarcity of resources there. Yeah. And that's often hindering the linking up and the deeper collaboration that needs to happen and take place. So in order for me, hope is about having the courage to see what's going on, not to be naive. There are deep vested interest to keep these old systems and institutions that were dualized by design in place. They're fighting back. We're seeing these very authoritarian political leaders popping up like mushrooms around the world. So in some ways, it almost feels like there's a whole new threats to democracy itself, in which it is being hollowed out from the inside out. We see this also I just came back from the United States. If you're looking at the extreme dualization and division that's been happening there because of their political systems. But there's, you know, many other countries that are having their own challenges too, but I just want to name that. So active hope to me is about having the courage to see things, see what's happening, see the pushbacks, look at where the vested interests are, but where you are, where your life is, where your consciousness is, where you have power to act, power to choose, be that new world, be that new paradigm. Because if you are that fully, then that's where these old divisive patterns cannot take root within you, in your life, or through your relationships. And at times it may feel like, oh wow, what can little me do? But you'll be surprised if you keep that hope, if you keep that flame, if you keep that deeper commitment alive in you. That in itself is already a heroic act, yeah? So that you don't fall asleep or you don't give in to this pushback. So don't underestimate the power of your consciousness, your conscious choice, and then always, every day, show up to see, how can I apply that? What can I do? How can I contribute to the deeper shift that is happening? Because it is happening. It's happening sometimes under the soil. It's a bit like in winter, we don't see what's growing in early spring. It is happening. There is an acceleration happening as well, but to me, if we really want to accelerate that civilizational transformation and new systemic design, it's also about making sure that we're going to put the resources and investments in that. And that is what is still lacking behind. Also, the fact that at this university, all of you are already having these conversations, learning this, I think that's amazing. You know, there's so many universities around the world where this is not even allowed to be a topic. So yeah, just want to acknowledge you all for that too.
Yeah, the implication of what you just said sounds a lot like that phrase we know a lot from Gandhi. You know that phrase that is very popular.
That's it.
Yeah.
Be the change.
Be the change you want to see.
Exactly.
Right. Those were the points that struck me, and I spent some time going through your slides again. They're very inspirational. So thank you for that. But let me see if there is any comment or anybody in the class. I don't know if they heard anything, but there's no any feedback. And Divya?
Just a comment that I really liked the parallels you drew with how butterfly, like you know, first it's a caterpillar, then in cocoon, then it gets its wings. So really resonated with that. So thank you.
All right, there no questions here. I don't know whether the online thing was enabled. There's no questions online. All right, so I think that will bring us to a wrap up for now. Anneloes.
Very good.
Thank you so very much. I'm happy to see that the thinking on the DAOs are progressing well.
Yes.
Yeah, we
It
did try
is.
to, as you know, we tried to do some case studies on some of those seeds and villages, but we didn't get all the interviews done. Only one or two were done. So they're not
Right.
enough. We'll have to wait, I guess, for the second round and then look at it again.
Yeah, because they're updating their token design a lot.
Right.
So this is really the early phase with seeds, also still of pioneering, seeking the ways that this can be done. So there's a lot of beautiful goodwill and good initiatives, but it's that technology is still complex.
Indeed. So we'll see how that goes, and then we'll see whether we do a follow-up later on.
Sure. And feel free to also work with our DAO as a case study. So you're welcome. We can always
Excellent.
work with your students.
Well, thanks again, and do give my regards to Kurt.
I'll do that. We'll be happy to hear that. And thank you so much.
All right.
And thanks for all your great work.
Yeah, thanks, Anneloes. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
Okay.
So should I just?
Ma'am, is this session is over?
Yes.
Okay. Can we
Thank
end?
you.
Like Chrome पे जाओ, एक मिनट इंड कर दो, माइक ऑन करो, हम जो माइक चालू है।